My name is Richard Miller. I'm 67 years old, and my story begins the night I opened a letter that shattered my peace of mind. It wasn't a stranger's letter. It was my own bank statement. My hands trembled as I read numbers that didn't add up. My son, the very person I trusted with everything I had, was tied to transactions I never authorized. In that moment, my world stopped spinning, and I realized my future might not be as safe as I believed. Backhand index pointing right before I share what happened next. Tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. I remember the day my son Michael promised me he'd take care of me. It was a warm Sunday afternoon, the kind of day where the smell of barbecue filled the air, and families gathered outside to laugh and talk. Michael sat across from me on the porch, his face calm but serious. He had just gotten a promotion at work, and I was so proud of him. He reached over, patted my hand, and said, "Dad, you've worked hard your whole life. You don't have to worry about the future anymore. I'll make sure you're taken care of." Those words sank into me like a blessing. For years, I had been quietly worrying about retirement, the bills, the upkeep of the house, the possibility of my health declining. It all weighed heavily on me. But when Michael looked me in the eyes and said those words, it felt like a burden had been lifted. My son was stepping up. I'd been a widower for nearly a decade by then. My wife, Linda, passed away far too soon, and since that day, Michael had become my anchor. I raised him as best I could, teaching him about honesty, hard work, and loyalty. To hear him promise to look after me, it was like all those years of sacrifice were finally paying off. Weeks later, we sat together in my kitchen, paperwork spread across the table. Michael convinced me that consolidating my retirement fund into an account he managed would make things easier. He said it would prevent confusion and keep me from worrying about numbers and statements I barely understood. I hesitated at first. I've always been careful with money. But then I looked at him, my own flesh and blood, and thought, why wouldn't I trust him? I signed the papers. The pen felt heavy in my hand, but I reminded myself that this was my son. I believed he had my best interests at heart. The early days of this arrangement felt almost comforting. Michael stopped by more often, asking about my needs, making sure I had groceries, even insisting I let him cover small repairs around the house. He had a way of speaking that reassured me. "Don't stress, Dad. I've got it all under control." I started sleeping better at night. The knot of worry in my chest loosened. When neighbors asked how I was managing, I proudly told them my son was taking care of everything. I even bragged a little, said how lucky I was to have a son like him. There was a sense of pride swelling inside me, mixed with relief. I had worked in a small manufacturing plant most of my life. The job was hard on my body, and the paychecks weren't always great, but I managed to put away a decent sum over the years. That money wasn't just cash. It was years of sweat, sacrifice, and missed vacations. To hand it over to Michael was more than trust. It was a father's belief that his son would honor his legacy. But even in those early weeks, there were moments that gnawed at me. Tiny cracks I chose to ignore. Like the time I asked for a small withdrawal to fix my old truck, and Michael told me it would be better if I waited another month. His reasoning sounded logical enough. The account's locked into short-term investments. "Dad, just wait, and you'll get more back." But something in his tone felt a little too practiced. Still, I brushed it off. He knows more about this than I do, I told myself. Trust him. I remember one evening especially well. Michael came over for dinner, and we sat at the table, just like old times. Halfway through the meal, I noticed how quickly he shifted the topic whenever I mentioned my retirement account. It was subtle, almost casual, but clear. When I asked about a recent statement I couldn't quite understand, he leaned back, smiled, and said, "Dad, you don't need to worry about those details. I've got everything handled." I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. Because to doubt him, to even consider the possibility that my own son might not have my best interests at heart, felt unthinkable. The truth is, I wanted peace more than answers. And in those moments, Michael gave me that peace, even if it was fragile. I held on to his promise like a lifeline. As the weeks turned into months, I convinced myself that everything was fine. I started spending more time in my garden, taking longer walks in the park, even joining a small group at the local community center. With Michael handling the finances, I felt free to live without the constant weight of worry. But deep down, in a place I rarely admitted even to myself, I knew there was something I wasn't seeing. A shadow just out of sight. A whisper of doubt that grew louder each time Michael avoided my questions. And that whisper became impossible to ignore the night I opened that bank statement. The envelope came by mistake. It wasn't one Michael meant for me to see. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had once signed away control, and I read through numbers that made no sense. Large withdrawals, transactions at places I didn't recognize. The account wasn't just being managed. It was being drained. My breath caught in my throat. The promise he had made me, the words that once filled me with comfort, now felt like a cruel echo. I gripped the paper in my hands, my vision blurring. How could he? How could my own son do this to me? That was the moment, the exact moment. I realized trust can be the sharpest weapon, and in the wrong hands, it cuts the deepest. I sat at the table, the bank statement trembling in my hands. My chest felt tight, my breath uneven. The house was silent, but in my head, a storm was raging. I wanted to believe there was some logical explanation, maybe a mistake, maybe a clerical error. But the more I scanned those numbers, the more my gut screamed the truth. This wasn't a mistake. I folded the statement and tucked it back into the envelope, sliding it into the drawer beside me. My first instinct wasn't to confront Michael. It was to wait, to watch, to see if he would come clean on his own. The next morning, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat on the porch. The air was crisp, the neighborhood still half asleep. I thought about how Michael had smiled just weeks before, assuring me everything was under control. Now those words felt hollow. Later that day, Michael came by, carrying a grocery bag like he often did. He set it down on the counter and said, "Picked up some things for you, Dad. Bread, milk, a few of those soups you like." I thanked him, but I couldn't stop staring at him, wondering if the son I raised, the boy I taught how to ride a bike, the man who promised to care for me, was the same man quietly draining the money I worked my whole life to save. I tried to test him, casually bringing up money. "Hey, Mike, I was thinking of maybe fixing the roof this spring. Might need to dip into the account a bit." He paused, just for a second, before answering. "Yeah, maybe we should hold off for now. The markets are a little shaky. I'll let you know when the timing's better." That pause, it wasn't long, barely noticeable, but it was enough. His eyes flickered, just for a moment, like he was scrambling for the right words. I let it go, but inside, a knot tightened. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more cracks. Michael's visits, once filled with easy conversation, now seemed rushed. He checked his phone constantly, excused himself for calls, and brushed off questions with rehearsed answers. One Saturday afternoon, I was trimming the bushes when my neighbor, Frank, wandered over. Frank was a good man, retired like me, always keeping an eye on the block. He leaned on the fence and said, "Hey Richard, saw your son the other night. He was at O'Malley's downtown. Looked like he was having a good time." I nodded politely, but my mind raced. O'Malley's wasn't exactly a cheap place. It was the kind of bar where young professionals went to flash money, not the kind of spot Michael usually hung around. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling. I told myself maybe Michael deserved to have fun, that he worked hard, but the doubt was eating at me. What if the fun was being funded by the account I trusted him with? The turning point came 2 weeks later. I had misplaced my reading glasses and asked Michael to grab them from the desk drawer. He opened the wrong drawer, the one where I'd hidden the bank statement. He didn't notice at first, but as he fumbled, the envelope slipped into view. His eyes landed on it, and for a split second, I saw panic flash across his face. He quickly handed me the glasses, avoiding eye contact, and shut the drawer a little too fast. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. "Yeah," he said quickly. "Just thought I saw a bill I forgot to pay." I nodded, pretending not to notice. But inside, the truth was becoming impossible to deny. I started paying closer attention. I looked at the way his car, a used sedan he'd had for years, suddenly had new tires, maybe even a new stereo system. I noticed the expensive watch on his wrist, one I had never seen before. And when I asked about it, he laughed it off, saying, "Oh, It was a gift from a friend. It didn't sit right. None of it did. One evening, I decided to push a little harder. We were sitting in the living room, the television humming in the background. I turned to him and said, "Michael, you're sure the account's doing okay? You know, I'm depending on it." He leaned forward, smiling that same easy smile. "Dad, you've got nothing to worry about. I promise." But this time, the promise felt different. It wasn't comforting. It was rehearsed, like a line from a play he'd said one too many times. The crack had widened. A few nights later, unable to sleep, I pulled out old family photo albums. Page after page, I saw Michael growing up, birthday parties, little league games, his high school graduation. Each picture told a story of love and sacrifice. I remembered working overtime to buy his first car, remembered skipping vacations so he could go to college. I had given him everything I could. And now, staring at those photos, I asked myself a question I never thought I'd ask. Did I raise the kind of man who would betray me? The thought made me sick, but I couldn't push it away. The final straw in this chapter came when I overheard him on the phone. He thought I was asleep in the next room, but I caught his voice low and urgent. "Don't worry," he whispered. "He doesn't suspect a thing. I'll get the rest soon." The words cut through me like a knife. I didn't know who he was talking to or what the rest meant, but I knew one thing for certain. The cracks weren't small anymore. They were breaking me wide open. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the hallway nightlight, casting shadows across the room. My hands clenched into fists, my heart pounding. I wanted to storm in, demand the truth, shout until he admitted what he was doing. But instead, I stayed silent, because in that silence, a plan was forming. I didn't know yet how I would handle it, or what I would do, but I knew one thing. Michael's promises no longer meant safety. They meant danger, and for the first time in my life, I was truly afraid of my own son. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I shut my eyes, I heard Michael's words again, echoing like thunder in my head. "He doesn't suspect a thing. I'll get the rest soon." The rest of what? The rest of my savings? The rest of my life's work? By morning, my decision was clear. If Michael was hiding something from me, I couldn't sit back anymore. I had to find out the truth on my own. The first step was small. When Michael dropped by that afternoon, I paid attention to every detail. The way he kept his phone face down on the table. The way he avoided my eyes whenever money slipped into the conversation. The way he rushed through dinner, like he had someplace better to be. After he left, I checked the driveway from the window. His taillights disappeared down the street, but my eyes lingered on the back seat. I could have sworn I saw a stack of manila folders. Not groceries. Not anything a son would normally bring home to his father. Something businesslike, something secret. That image stayed with me. The next day, I called my old friend Frank, the same neighbor who had mentioned seeing Michael at O'Malley's. "Frank," I said, keeping my voice low, "if you see Michael around town, could you let me know? Just out of curiosity." Frank chuckled. "You spying on your boy now, Richard?" I forced a laugh, but my stomach churned. Something like that. "Just humor an old man, will you?" "Sure thing," he said. "I'll keep an eye out." 2 nights later, the phone rang. It was Frank. "Richard," he whispered like he was sharing state secrets. "He's at O'Malley's again. Looks like he's meeting someone. You want me to?" "No," I cut in quickly. "Don't approach him. Just thank you for telling me." I hung up and sat in silence. My pulse raced. The thought of Michael living some double life, spending nights in expensive bars with strangers, left me sick to my core. The following morning, I took a bolder step. When Michael came over, he left his jacket draped over the chair. While he went to the kitchen to grab a soda, I slipped my hand into the pocket. My fingers brushed against a folded receipt. I pulled it out and quickly scanned it before shoving it back. It was from O'Malley's. The total stunned me, $2.36. For one night, 2 dinners, multiple drinks, and a charge that looked like it could have been for a private room. When Michael came back, I smiled as if nothing had happened. But inside I was crumbling. That night, I pulled out a small notebook I hadn't touched in years. I started writing everything down. Dates, times, receipts, observations. It felt strange, keeping a log on my own son, but something inside me insisted, if you don't protect yourself, no one else will. Over the next week, the notebook filled quickly. Michael's visits grew more erratic. Sometimes he'd show up late at night with excuses that didn't add up. Traffic, work errands. Other times he wouldn't show at all, texting me that he was too busy, but would catch up soon. And every time he left, I searched. His jacket pockets, the car parked in my driveway, the trash he tossed carelessly in my kitchen bin. Piece by piece, a trail of clues formed. Receipts from restaurants, a flyer for a poker tournament downtown, a business card from a man named Jay Collins, Investments. The name stuck with me. Who was Jay Collins? And why was my son carrying his card? I called the number on the card the next day, disguising my voice as best I could. Hello, is this Mr. Collins? I asked. A slick voice answered. Speaking. Who's this? Panic gripped me, and I hung up without another word. But the sound of that voice told me all I needed. It wasn't the kind of man I wanted my son tied up with. Days later, another break came, though not from anything I did. I was walking past Michael's car one evening when I noticed a folder sticking out from under the passenger seat. Against my better judgment, I opened the door and pulled it out. Inside were bank documents, transfers, withdrawals, all tied to my account. My name, his name, and amounts that made my stomach twist. Thousands gone. I shoved the folder back before Michael returned, but the damage was done. Not just to the account, but to my heart. Seeing proof on paper was different than just suspecting. It made everything real. Still, I kept silent. I wasn't ready for the confrontation. Not yet. I needed more. The secret trail kept unfolding. Frank called me again, this time saying Michael was seen not just at O'Malley's, but at a poker table in the back. Chips stacked high in front of him. Poker. Gambling. That explained the sudden money flow, the expensive watch, the nervous phone calls. But it didn't explain the deeper question, why my money? Why hadn't he just asked me for help? If he was in trouble, why sneak, why betray? The question spun in my head endlessly, leaving me hollow. The final piece came one rainy Thursday night. Michael had left his phone charging on my counter while he ran to the store. It buzzed once, twice, then a message lit up the screen. I knew I shouldn't look, but I did. The message read, "You'd better have the rest by Friday, or we're done. Don't bring excuses." My hand trembled as I set the phone down. Whoever we was, they weren't friends. They weren't family. They were the kind of people who issued ultimatums. The secret trail had led me here, to the edge of a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to face. By the time Michael came back through the door, shaking the rain from his jacket, I was sitting there at the table, the weight of everything pressing down on me. He smiled casual, pretending nothing was wrong, but I couldn't see the boy I raised anymore. I could only see a man tangled in secrets, a man pulling me down with him, and I knew sooner or later, those secrets were going to come crashing out into the open. Michael shook his wet jacket and draped it over the chair, humming like the world was perfectly fine. The sound grated against my ears, because nothing was fine anymore. My hands rested flat on the table, pressing into the wood as though I needed it to steady me. "Hey, Dad," Michael said cheerfully. "You want me to heat up that leftover casserole?" I didn't answer. My silence made him glance up, confused. His eyes darted to me, then to the table, and finally back to my face. Something in my expression must have told him I wasn't in the mood for casual small talk. "We need to talk," I said. My voice was low, firm. Michael froze for a second, then shrugged. "Sure, what about?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." The quiet in the room was heavy, the kind that pressed down on both of us. Outside, rain tapped against the window in a steady rhythm. Michael pulled the chair out and sat, trying to look relaxed, but I could see the tension in his jaw. His foot tapped against the floor, betraying his nerves. I leaned forward. "Michael, I know." He blinked. "Know what?" "Don't play dumb," I said. "I know about O'Malley's. I know about the poker. I know about the money. My money." His face went pale. The confident smile he always wore crumbled. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, like a fish gasping for air. "Dad, Stop," I cut him off. Don't lie. I've seen the receipts. The bank transfers. I even saw the messages on your phone. Michael's hands clenched into fists on the table. You went through my stuff. My voice rose sharper than I intended. You went through my life savings. You think I wouldn't notice thousands of dollars vanishing? You think I wouldn't notice you sneaking around behind my back? He flinched at my tone, but didn't speak. His silence was almost worse than excuses. Finally, he whispered, "It wasn't supposed to go this far." That sentence hit me like a punch. I sat back, stunned. "So it's true," I said quietly. Michael ran a hand through his damp hair, avoiding my eyes. "I thought I could fix it before you found out. Just a little money to start. I thought I could double it, maybe triple it, and then pay you back without you ever knowing." "Double it," I scoffed. "Through gambling? Through shady men who send threats to your phone?" Michael's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "You saw that." "I saw enough," I said coldly. For a moment, the only sound was the rain outside and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Michael looked like a boy again, small, scared, cornered. But the truth was he wasn't a boy anymore. He was a grown man, and the choices he made weren't mistakes of youth. They were betrayals. "You promised me," I said, my voice breaking despite myself. "You promised to take care of me, to make sure I was safe in my old age. And instead, you've been draining me dry. Do you understand what that does to a man? To find out his own son is the one holding the knife to his back." Michael's lips trembled. "Dad, I wasn't trying to hurt you. I swear. I didn't know what else to do. Things got out of hand." I slammed my palm against the table, startling him. "Out of hand? You've put me in danger, Michael. Whoever you owe. They don't sound like the forgiving type. You've tied me into your mess without a second thought." Tears welled in his eyes, but I felt no comfort in them. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I messed up. I thought I was smarter than I am. I just wanted—" "What?" I snapped. "What did you want so badly that you'd risk your father's future? What could be worth stealing from me?" His voice dropped, almost a whisper. "Respect. I wanted to prove I wasn't a failure." Those words cut me deeper than the lies. For a long moment, I just stared at him, torn between anger and sorrow. Respect doesn't come from lies, Michael. It doesn't come from taking what isn't yours. Respect is earned, and right now you've lost mine. He put his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. "Please, Dad, just give me time. I can fix this. I can make it right." I sat there, watching him crumble, and felt the bitter sting of betrayal mixed with something worse, pity. He wasn't just reckless. He was desperate, and desperation was dangerous. "Michael," I said slowly, "tell me the truth. How much do you owe?" He hesitated, then mumbled, "More than I can pay back right now." "How much?" I pressed. His voice was barely audible. 20,000. My stomach dropped. 20,000. Gone. My savings, my future, my security. All gambled away like chips on a table. I leaned back, the weight of his confession pressing me down. For years, I had imagined growing old with dignity. Maybe traveling a little. Maybe just sitting on my porch in peace. Instead, I was staring at my son, who had turned that dream into a nightmare. The quiet stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, I stood. Michael looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "Dad," he asked weakly. I shook my head. "I don't know what happens next, Michael. But I know one thing. You can't stay here tonight." His face twisted in shock. "What? You're kicking me out?" "I need space," I said firmly. "I need to think. Right now, every second I look at you, all I see is betrayal. I can't carry that tonight." He pushed back his chair, his movements jerky. "Fine," he muttered. "If that's what you want." He grabbed his jacket and stormed out into the rain, slamming the door behind him. The echo rattled through the house, but the silence that followed was even louder. I stood there alone, staring at the empty chair across from me. The confrontation had ended, but there was no peace in it. Only a hollow ache that spread through my chest. For the first time in my life, I truly felt old. Not because of the years behind me, but because of the weight pressing down on me now. The weight of knowing my own son had betrayed me, and that nothing would ever be the same again. The night Michael left my house after our confrontation, silence filled every corner. The air was heavy, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension. I sat in my recliner, my heart pounding, my hands trembling on the armrest. My son had walked out, his face hard, his voice cold, and for the first time in my 70 years of living, I felt like I had lost him completely. I couldn't sleep that night. The clock ticked on, the minutes stretching into hours, each one a reminder that time wasn't waiting for me. My mind went back and forth between anger, grief, and a strange calm acceptance. I knew one thing. I had to speak the truth, not to Michael. He had made his choice, but to myself, to the family name, and to whatever was left of my dignity. The next morning, I pulled out the old cedar box from under my bed. Inside were documents I had kept safe for decades, property papers, the retirement fund details, even letters from my late wife. She used to tell me, "Richard, one day your words will matter more than your money. Don't leave this world without speaking your truth." Those words echoed in my head like a drumbeat. I spread the papers across the table, organizing them into neat stacks. My hands were slow but steady. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about leaving behind clarity. I wrote a letter, pouring out every ounce of honesty I had left. In the letter, I told the truth of what had happened, how I had trusted Michael, how I had believed in his promises, and how betrayal had cut deeper than any loss of money. I didn't write with bitterness. I wrote with finality. "Michael," I began, "you were my pride. I gave you not just my savings, but my faith. And somewhere along the way, you chose to bury that faith under lies. This account you thought I'd never find. It isn't just numbers on a page. It is proof that you valued greed over blood. Still, you remain my son, and I hope life teaches you what I could not." I paused, staring at the ink drying on the page. My chest felt heavy, but not with pain, with release. Later that afternoon, I walked slowly to the lawyer's office. The bell above the door jingled when I entered, and Mrs. Harper, the receptionist, smiled warmly. "Morning, Richard. What brings you here today?" I gave a faint smile. "Just tying up loose ends." My lawyer, Mr. Grant, greeted me with his usual calm demeanor. I handed him the documents and the letter. "Make sure this stays sealed until the time comes," I said quietly. He nodded, sensing the weight in my voice, and didn't ask questions. For that, I was grateful. As I left the office, the September wind brushed against my face. For the first time in months, I felt a strange peace. Back home, I made a cup of coffee and sat by the window. The neighborhood kids were riding their bikes, their laughter carrying through the street. I thought of Michael at their age, riding his red bicycle, yelling, "Dad, watch me go faster." I smiled at the memory, even as tears blurred my vision. That night, I picked up the phone. I didn't call Michael. Instead, I called my granddaughter, Emily. Her voice was gentle, a reminder that innocence still existed in the family line. We talked about school, about her favorite books, about how she wanted to learn the guitar. Before hanging up, I said, "Emily, always remember one thing. Trust is more valuable than money. If you give it, guard it. If you receive it, honor it." She didn't fully understand, but one day she would. Days passed quietly. Michael didn't call, and I didn't expect him to. I focused on small routines, watering the plants, fixing the squeaky door hinge, walking to the park. The betrayal still hurt, but it no longer controlled me. I had spoken my truth, written my last word, and secured what mattered. One evening, I found myself in the backyard, the sun dipping low, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. I whispered aloud, though no one was there to hear, "I forgive you, Michael. Not because you asked, but because I need to leave this world lighter than I entered it." The weight I had carried for so long lifted in that moment. Weeks later, a letter arrived. It was from Michael. His handwriting was shaky, uncertain. I opened it slowly, not sure what I'd find. "Dad," it began, "I don't know why I did what I did. Maybe I thought I deserved more. Maybe I was blinded by ambition. But after leaving your house, I couldn't sleep. Your words stayed with me. I know I've lost your trust, maybe forever, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I read those lines again and again. The apology didn't erase what had happened, but it was something. A crack in the wall he had built. I sat at my desk, pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, and wrote my reply. Short but honest. Michael, I can't undo what's been done, and neither can you. But life gives us choices every day. Today, I choose to forgive. The rest is up to you. I sealed the envelope and placed it by the door for the next morning's mail. As the days turned into weeks, I realized something important. My last word wasn't about revenge, or even about teaching Michael a lesson. It was about leaving behind a legacy of truth, forgiveness, and strength. My retirement fund could be lost, spent, or stolen, but my words, once spoken, would remain. On a quiet Sunday morning, I stood in front of the mirror and whispered to my reflection, Richard, you've done enough. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. My story doesn't end with grand gestures or dramatic scenes. It ends with a father who spoke his truth, forgave without forgetting, and chose to leave the world carrying peace instead of pain. And maybe, just maybe, that was the last gift I could give my son.